What's happening, you guys? Happy, oh gosh, Tuesday? First, I was like, what day is it? But of course, it's Tuesday because it was Therapy Tuesday. And when I say Therapy Tuesday, I'm saying that with a smile in case you're not watching the full version on YouTube with us, if you're just listening in to wherever you stream your podcast at. I just want you to know that I am smiling. The reason being is that I was not able to go to therapy last week. Pause for gasp. I know, because if to know me is to know that I go to therapy ritually. And when I say ritually, it could be like a monsoon outside and I'm going to therapy. So missing last week was definitely hard, but it honestly made for all the more to share and touch base on and talk about today in today's session. So I'm so excited for this specific podcast topic. It's kind of ironic because what we're going to be talking about today and the fact that I'm saying that I'm excited about it. I feel like I'm excited about it because it's something that I've come out from the other side of things on, and that to me is like when we can share and speak from our heart specifically on trivial matters, things through life that we've been through and we've come out from the other side. That to me that's the cheddar. That's even the bread and butter. Am I making myself hungry? I don't know. I feel like I'm on a tangent right now. But if you, by chance, are listening in, as usual, you know my tradition is to share with you guys my earrings in case you are not watching us on YouTube. And but here I am in all of my fabulous. In fact, this week, specifically today, I'm dressing for dopamine. What do I mean by that? Every piece of article of clothing accessories on my body, and particularly today, gives me joy, makes me happy, gives me joy. As a matter of fact, my earrings, in case you are listening in, are, I guess what they would call like pom-poms, basically. They're multicolored, but they're pom-poms. They're fabulous. I got them from a really cool, really great boutique that's based down in New Orleans. And I love them so much. But yeah, and they have all the sparkly things, all the fun things, especially for us neurospicy people. But I'm obsessed with all of their colorful pom-pom earrings. So if you hear anything throughout the recording, hopefully not, it's probably going to be moving. I'm back and forth, and I'm going to try not to do it as much because I don't know if I can hear him. You can probably hear him, but hopefully not. But yeah, so let's go ahead and dive into this week. I guess to catch y'all up a little bit before we get to like the deep stuff. Life has been good. It is the heat of the summer, so I don't know where you're living at while you're listening to this, but we are in the brink of summer, and to get me out of the house is quite a special moment because more likely I will be hibernating in my house for the remainder of the summer. Unless we are traveling, which will be soon. This month we are traveling to a new state for fun, for work, for fun, a little bit of both. But other than that, yeah, if I'm not hanging out with friends are mostly coming to my house because, like I said, it's honestly way too hot. In fact, today was really funny because I did run a bunch of errands. And I made sure that I had everything that I needed to run my errands before I went to therapy, because there was no way and there was no chance whatsoever that I was going to come back to the house, get out of the car, go back inside with the AC, mind you, grab what I needed, and then get back into the car, but then also have to get back outside. That was not going to happen. And I know me, and I knew that if I got out of the car and had to step outside to come back to the house and feel all the heat, I was not going to be coming back out. So, I would have liked to also say that in another world that I would have actually had all of the things together and planned to go run my errands before therapy. But that did not happen. So I ran my errands afterwards. But it's okay because I got it all done. And on a side note, I'm very excited because I have a new business adventure that I'll be doing. And I feel like I'll talk a little bit more about it probably like next week. But it's something that's been in the making for quite some time now. And I'm super excited about it. If you follow me and you follow my content, I'm still independent consultant. That's not going anywhere. So if you know the fragrance side of me and my life, that's not going anywhere because I'll be doing that until the end of my days. If you know me, I'm passionate about that. But on another note, I have a new business adventure that I'll be doing. Something, like I said, that's been near and dear on my heart for quite some time now. And I just went ahead and took the leap of faith. Got everything up and moving, up in motion, whatever you want to say. And I'm excited about it. And I feel like I'll have more to talk about this next week. We'll go into more detail about it. I'll share a little bit about it. Won't be like the entire podcast, but I do like to give y'all little glimpses of my life and what's going on. But like I said, the next couple weeks I'll be traveling, which I'm very excited about, because this trip we do every year, but there's always a different state that we go to with the company that I work with, and it's going to be a lot of fun because the husband and I are going, so I'm very much looking forward to that. In fact, we will be traveling to Minneapolis, and I have never been to Minnesota, let alone Minneapolis. So if you know somebody by chance that lives in that area, or if you traveled there before, and if you have any tips, please be sure to leave them in the comments, specifically on either places that you recommend eating at, because I am a big time foodie, so is my husband. But maybe some things to go do in the area that are like low budget cost, not too expensive. But yeah, so without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about this week's topic. So, it's interesting how, I feel like I say this quite often whenever I'm recording for this podcast, that whenever a topic comes up or something that's on my heart, I just love it. And I'm just going to say it. I feel like I'm saying it every time, and I'm going to keep saying it, that I just love so much whenever like a message is placed on my heart, when something speaks louder than everything else, that I'm like, oh, this is what I want to talk about this week. And what we're going to talk about a little about is like chaos, and when chaos feels comforting to us, when chaos feels like home, second nature. It's maybe the environment that you grew up in, or maybe it's your current state of living. I know for the longest time, like I said, for like the last couple years or so, that in my life that I thrived in organized chaos. And that is the only way I could have described my life over the last couple years. And, the reason why all this got brought up was through a conversation that I was having with a friend of mine a couple days ago. I spent the better half of the weekend relaxing. My husband and I kept it low key. My partner and I, like, we didn't really go anywhere, other than I know that he golfed for a little bit one of the mornings. But for myself, I stayed home. I stayed home, relaxed. I guess it was like Friday through the day. I got a lot of like my other like weekend type things around the house out of the way. So, typical like cleaning, laundry. I did that all Friday during the day. And so I was really happy that I did that, because that set myself up for the weekend to where I could just chill. I relaxed. I actually finished up one book the end of last week, and then there's a second part to the book that I've been reading. So I immediately, I already had, thanks to one of my good friends, if you know, she's probably watching this, probably listening. So thank you so much for letting me borrow your book. I'll have it back sooner than later. But she was so kind to lend me the second part of the book, because she saw that I started the first one. So I was so excited because I didn't have to wait for it to be delivered, because I already had it, right? So I was definitely ready, more than ready. So this weekend I dove into the second half of the series, and that was almost pretty much, for the most part, like what consumed most of my weekend, and I'm not hating it. So that's kind of like the conversation started with my friend a couple days ago, when we were talking about like how our weekend was. And it was interesting because like her weekend was very packed. She had a lot going on. Every day there was a couple of things that she was doing per day through the weekend. She said overall it was a great weekend, that she, made some memories, had some fun, but was exhausted, come Sunday evening into Monday, and didn't get a lot of like downtime for herself. She had a lot of fun with like friends and family, but it was just like go, 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 basically. And she was like, it was very chaotic. I was stressed a lot of the time. But then she compensated. It was like, well, it's summertime, it's it's summertime. We're making memories with the family, and I'm not having to work as much, and we're trying to get all these things in and all these memories in, and like I said, like go, 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 and no break time. And I thought that was interesting, because like my weekend was like complete opposite of hers, right? And, I feel like there's a lot of people who, over the last couple of years, that have come to know me, that have not known me prior. So, from my past, per se, that they know that I, at this point in my life, am a very peaceful person, which is funny because, I have if you are watching the full video right now, I have a lot of color on today, which is usually typical for me anyways. But I'm a very peaceful person. I take pride in the fact that I do hear a lot from my peers that, my friends and such, that I'm a very calm, peaceful person. My energy that I give off, for the most part, that they love being around me, that I'm like a calming, safe presence. What's interesting is that my life wasn't always like that. And that's why I say I take great pride in that, because I was not always a peaceful person. That I was a very angry person, bitter person, thrived in chaos. And, I have to say that, like, I feel sad for those that are, like, in my circle that I talk to on, like, a week-to-week, monthly, day-to-day basis, whoever they are. I just feel really sad, when they tell me that they don't get a lot of time to themselves, or they're stressed all the time, or they're tired all the time, or they don't get a break, or, when I talk about something maybe that I'm doing in my life, like, they're like, oh, what did you do over the weekend? I'm like, oh, I got to read a lot of my book, and they're like, oh, I wish I had time for that. And I know that I'm never going to say to them, like, oh, and it just always gets under my skin, like how people say that we all have the same 24 hours. We all have the same time frame. I mean, in a way, yes. But the thing is that it's just so much more complex than that, right? Like, it's not just a matter of we get to pick and choose, or, we all have the same 24 hours, and you can decide like what your priorities are, and like, yes and no, I don't know, like, I can't agree with that, but I can't disagree with that, because it also is just so much more depth to that. Like, it depends upon where somebody's like frame of mind is, right? Like their emotional state, or maybe they're going through a tough season, and even though, yes, they could clear their schedule and they could move things around, but then it's like, that's also one more thing that they have to do, right? So, like, I get it whenever those that I'm in conversations with, and my friends and my community, like when we're catching up with one another, and then they say, like, oh, I wish I could do something like that, or I just don't have the time, or, wherever the case may be, they're stressed, they're tired, etc. Like, I completely, I get where they're coming from. Like, I can't fully understand to the extent of like where they're at, but I can for sure relate to it in one way or another, because I have also been there myself. So, welcome y'all for hanging out with me this week. I am ready for this. This is definitely going to be a little bit more of like a deep dive. But, let's talk a little bit about when chaos feels comfortable to us, when chaos feels like home. So the space where we unravel, like what's tangled up, sit with what's real, and rebuild faith in a way that's honest and healing. Like, that's what we're here for, right? Like, that's my overall focus and my thought processes, like when it comes to this podcast, like overall. And I want to talk a little bit about something that is going to possibly hit home for you guys. Maybe it's something that you can relate to, like myself. That's something that a part of you that you used to be, or it could be possibly hitting home a little bit harder because it's in direct relation to like maybe possibly what you're going through right now in your current life. But here's the thing, is like, let's think about or question like why we sometimes crave chaos. Right? Why do we crave chaos? Why is chaos something that, if we felt comfortable with it for so long in our life, like, why is it something that we just like, oh, things are going a little too good, and then we start craving the chaos, especially when we're empaths, like myself. Like, if you're an empath, you were then possibly raised in an unpredictable environment. I don't know if you can relate to that or not, but that's the thing, right? Like, if you're an empath, specifically an empath who was brought up in an unpredictable environment, like, that in itself is like, ooh, like that, that really hits home for me. Like, those two things, because that's typically not, like, an empath, you don't typically, as an empath, want to be in an environment that is unpredictable or you feel unsafe. So let's dive in a little bit further. So for the longest time, talking about myself. For the longest time, I lived in what I like to call a spicy emotional state. I I was anxious for the longest time. Anxious, reactive to no end. Like 0 to 100 with anger. And I always felt like the world was against me. And I was always deeply offended by not even like just what somebody was going to say, but just like their overall presence. And I always felt like I was constantly being judged, like that people were always having it out for me. Or, I had my walls up and I was always like, everyone is like out for me. Like everyone has something bad about, to say about me, or, no one is for me. Like I would always, like, the smallest of things with an individual was like piss me off so quickly. I was so reactive. I was easily triggered. And honestly, if I'm being honest, I would thrive on picking fights. I loved, for the longest time in my past, like for the longest time, I loved picking fights. I enjoyed it. I would honestly, as an empath, I would take the time to get to know somebody, and then I would figure out like what how could I push their buttons? How could I get under their skin? And on days when I was bored, or I felt like that things were a little bit too calm, whether it was in my relationships or whether it was with my friendships, I wanted to kind of like poke the bear, right? Like I wanted to poke it, and I wanted to pick fights, and I wanted to make sure that I was going to pick a fight because that's where I thrived. Like that's where I felt like the most alive, like the most, like all the energy. If I didn't feel like my emotional fire was being fueled, because that's how I would fuel my fire, right? Was picking those fights. I'd either stir something up, or the opposite, I would check out completely. I would be done. I would end the friendships. I would end the relationship, because at that point I was bored. Things were a little bit dull. They weren't spicy, so to speak. And my life wasn't getting fueled by that fire, right? Of like constant chaos. So as an empath, when I wasn't getting that, I would check out. I would walk away. Whatever that looked like. Like I said, ending friendships, maybe dismissing friends for a while, kind of like what we talk about like now, like referred to as like ghosting. I wouldn't talk to them for quite a while. I'd kind of write them off, dismiss them. Or if it was a relationship, I would get bored and be like, bye, it's not working out. And then bless and release and like move on, basically. And for a while, I thought that was just my personality. I thought that was just, this is just who I am. This is who I am. And when I was younger, I love this saying, not now, but when I was younger, I would thrive on this. And I would say, get on my level. Get on my level. And what I meant by that was that you either are going to put up with my spicy behavior, that you are also somebody that maybe perhaps came from a home environment where you thrived in chaos, the unpredictability, unpredictableness of life. And if that was the case, get on board. We're gonna have fun together. Life is good. Carpe diem, right? Seize the day. Let's have some fun. Otherwise, if it was the opposite of that type of personality, it was like, no, we're not connecting. We're not. You're not on my level, and I just can't hang out with you. But I felt like that was just who I was, right? Like I was, again, like a passionate person. I was, like I said earlier, I was spicy. I was passionate. That I had a lot to say. And I got to a point in my life where like I pivoted, because I was a quiet, keep to myself, yes girl, satisfy everybody, never had an opinion, never wanted to stir the pot, because that's also the environment that I was raised in, right? Like where I was always felt like I was skating on thin ice. And then it was interesting how whenever I got to like my preteen, like high school, or really like preteen, like adolescent time, where there was something that just kind of like snapped within, I would like to say more likely it was my hormones, but there was something like kind of snapped, and was almost like I wasn't hypnotized anymore. I like woke up and it was like, oh, I've got some opinions and I'm here to share them loud and proud. And that's how I was for the longest time, like moody, angry, to the world, full of opinions, and I'm here to share it all. and I would say that not only did I feel like that I was a passionate person, and that this was just me. It was like, there's no fixing me. This is just my personality. It's just who I am. I didn't do boring, and again, I spoke my mind. But underneath all that noise, all that chaos that I was high functioning chaos, was a girl who learned to survive in fight or flight mode. I grew up in an environment that was not only unpredictable, right? I talked about that earlier, that my home environment was not only unpredictable, but I was constantly on alert. I was constantly, I felt like that I was always on thin ice, that I was tiptoeing around my home environment, my life, where again, I didn't want to piss anyone off, right? I didn't want to upset anybody. I didn't know what I was always walking into, so therefore I was always super cautious. There was no solid ground that I was standing on in my upbringing, in my home life. No consistent emotional safety. And as an empath, someone who naturally absorbs, let me rewind. If you are not exactly sure what an empath is, it basically is somebody who naturally absorbs other people's energy and emotions. So again, to like know me is to know that now, like fast forward to like present day, I am extremely protective of who not only I keep in my inner circle, but how I go about like my day to day. You heard me earlier when I shared how my weekend went, right? That low key kept to myself. It was also because I did a lot of hanging out and fun and making memories with my friends through the course of like 3 days prior to when the weekend started. So typically, like what that looks like for me is that even though I was having fun for those couple of days with different groups of friends and such, I needed to unplug. I needed to, create a safe space for myself for peace. I wanted to reboot my battery. But here's the thing is that when you, again, going back to like you being like, if you're an empath, the hard part about that is that whoever you're around, you are going to be sucking up. Like if you're not protective of your peace and setting up those boundaries, your being is like sucking up to those individuals that are around you that with their energy and with their emotions, we naturally as empaths absorb that type of energy and emotion, and good and bad. So that's why it's important for us to be aware of like who are you holding space for, who's in your home environment, who's in your workplace, who are your neighbors, who are your friends. Because I'm here to tell y'all, if you got individuals in your life that make you feel a certain way, that you're like, something like your gut, something like in your heart, your headspace, your overall physical being doesn't feel calm, doesn't feel at peace, doesn't feel trustworthy, doesn't feel at rest. If there's something that kind of stirs within you that just doesn't quite sit right when you're in that presence of that specific person, if you can, get them out of your life. If you can't, make sure to do yourself a favor and create as much space between you and that individual as possible, whether it's getting up, walking out of the room, going to a different environment, leaving the place of wherever you're at, wherever that looks like for you, wherever you're at. Like I said, do yourself a favor and create space and distance between you and that individual. And the more that you practice that, the more that you spend one-on-one time with yourself and figuring out like, how can I get to a place where I have a little bit more peace in my life? That's going to look different for everybody. It's certainly baby steps. But when you get to that point, whatever that looks like for you in your day-to-day life, you'll find that as you start peeling back the layers of the work that you're doing within yourself, you'll get to a place in your life where you'll find that you'll be a little bit more like fine-tuned with those that do come into your space, into like your bubble, your area, that once again, they don't sit right with you. Like their peace, or I'm sorry, their spirit, their aura, their overall emotion that comes with them doesn't sit right with you. And then that's where you're able to basically weed out the ones that you're like, you know what? It's just not working out for us anymore. No matter what that looks like again, no matter who that person is. And like I said, the more that you practice that, the more that you create a sense of peace for yourself and you're doing the work within for your own self, the more and more it's going to become a little bit more easier for you to be able to detect those that are around you and be a little bit more, again, like I said earlier, like in tune with what's taking place in your environment. But, growing up, I didn't just feel my own stress, because we all deal with some sort of stress, right? So growing up, I not only dealt with my own stress, but on top of that, I carried everyone else's too. So chaos started to then at that point feel a little bit more like home for me. Chaos felt like it was normal. What is normal, right? Chaos started feeling like it was just kind of second nature to me. This is just how things are. You know, what's interesting is like, think about like the home environment that you grew up in, and no matter what that looked like. And that interesting, like how you come about like those moments in your life as you are getting older, and you get to a point where there's certain moments where, especially I feel like more specifically through like your adolescent to maybe like preteen life, where then you start hanging out with your friends and you're going over to maybe their houses with their parents, or maybe you're not doing that, but you're having conversations with your friends and talking about like your upbringing, or as you get, start getting into like your college age level and you're getting out of college and such, that maybe like your early 20s, right, mid 20s, you're having conversations with adults and young adults. And at that point, again, you're sharing like your memories from your childhood, or whatever the case may be, right? Like your religious background, or maybe traditions that you had in your house, or what it was like being around whoever your family members were, right? But whatever the case may be, the conversations that you're having as you're getting older. Isn't it interesting how as we go from like being at a younger age and then on, that we begin to find that how your friend grew up in their home environment, not quite the same as the way that you were raised, right? The things that you witnessed, the things that you heard, the things that you were told, seen, all the things, right? Not quite the same. But then on top of that, like we are so sheltered. Like I remember I was so sheltered in my own home environment for so long that I felt like everything that happened in our home was what everybody went through. Like this is the norm, right? So living in an environment where it was always chaotic, it felt like it was normal to me. I was like, oh, this is everybody's home life. But so I carried everyone else's stress as well, not just my own. And so chaos started to feel a little bit more like home again. And conflict meant connection. So if I had a conflict with somebody, whether it was in a relationship or friendship, or even, dare I say, family member, it made me feel like I was connected with them. It made me feel like that we're fueling our fire, right? Like there's some passion, there's some love there. And it meant that like, we're okay. We're in a good, healthy place. Little did I know. but I did believe for the longest time that conflict to me felt like I was connecting with somebody. The drama, if there was drama taking place in my life with whoever it was with, the drama meant that someone was paying attention to me, that someone was holding space for me. If we were fighting, if we were disagreeing, if there was chaos, it felt like that I was being seen and heard, that someone was paying attention. Calm to me for the longest time felt uncomfortable. Calm was something's wrong. Something's not quite right. I did something wrong. I'm in trouble. I said the wrong thing. They don't want to be my friend anymore. I'm about to be punished. Things are not going to go so well if it was calm. Calm to me felt foreign. It did not feel safe. It felt unsafe. But here's where the unscrambling began. Do you like how I did that? Here's where the unscrambling began. God started at that point showing me over time that I was not created for survival mode. That instead I was created for peace. And that anxiety was not my identity. It was a response, a learned one, but it was a response. And the first step to healing was noticing. It was noticing that I was reacting, not living. Noticing that I picked fights when I felt unseen. That I ran when things felt too steady. Maybe perhaps you can relate to that. That when things felt a little too calm, when things are going a little too well, that we're going to run from it. That was something that I witnessed growing up within my own household, that when things were not going so great, like when things were a little too good to be true, that disruption would take place in my household. When I started putting a name to it, it started losing its control over me. It started to not play as such a major role in my life, and that the idea of having peace in my day-to-day life seemed all the more possible. It felt a little bit more like it could happen. So maybe you're listening to this, maybe you're streaming this specific podcast and hanging out with me, and maybe you're realizing that you have done the same thing. Maybe I've said something so far during this time that you've been hanging out with me and listening that resonated with you, that gave you that, right? Like that pit in our stomach feeling where it's like, oh, yep. Or maybe perhaps when I said something recently during this podcast, that maybe I've said something so far that has triggered a memory, send you back to a time that's just like, I'm going to have to hit pause and come back to this later because that's a heavy hitter. Maybe you, just like myself, have mistaken chaos for passion. Or maybe you've mistaken survival for strength. Maybe you walked away from peaceful people because their calm felt threatening. I am guilty about that myself. I've had friendships come and go in the past. I've been in relationships that were, actually looking back on it, fairly healthy. I had friendships that they were only looking out for me, that they were, again, like a peaceful, calm person. And I couldn't relate to that. And it just was like, this is weird and I don't like this. And it just made me feel uncomfortable. And again, I just couldn't relate. So I didn't want those individuals in my life. And the relationships that I'm thinking of that I had at one point that were considered otherwise pretty healthy relationships, I pushed those individuals further and further out. And I challenged them. And I was like, if we're not fighting and if we're not disagreeing, if we're not yelling at each other, because the disagreement and the chaos and the unpredictableness of my life was, again, what I was raised around. So if I wasn't getting the same thing in my relationships, I felt like I couldn't trust this person. That I was like, okay, something's going on. Like, they're up to no good because it's a little too good to be true. Or when is the other shoe going to drop? Or because I didn't know what that felt like, right? Again, it was foreign to me. Having a peaceful state of mind, having a healthy and peaceful relationship with somebody or a friendship with somebody, I never knew what that looked like. And for quite some time, I didn't even have that as an example as what to turn to. So that's why it just didn't feel like natural to me. Like, it just was like, it just didn't sit well at the time, like with my spirit. But maybe you walked away from peaceful people again because their calm felt threatening. Maybe you've thought to yourself, I just don't do stillness. Like I said earlier, I feel like that was me for the longest time. But it was like, like if you're not having, like, living life on the edge of the edge of your seat, if you're not like living it one day at a time and having a wild time and, like peaceful people or peacefulness and slow and taking it easy and, the simple things in life, like for the longest time, I was just like, that's good for you. But like, that's not for me. And the stillness, I was like, I just don't do stillness. Like, that's not for me. Like, I can't imagine what it would be like in my life to like slow down and then take time out, or have a weekend to where you're not really doing much and you're just reading a book or just taking it easy. Or as I used to say, having a lazy time. I don't even say that anymore. Because I'm like, I will find any other word in the book to describe that. Like having a slow down Sunday, a slow down weekend, having a simple weekend, taking time out for yourself, anything but lazy. Because let's be honest, the only individual that's going to refer to somebody as like, I had a lazy day, or I'm having a lazy morning. I feel like that we put that on ourselves and we label it that, because we're too afraid that society is going to judge us for taking time out for ourselves, to have like peaceful moments, to reboot our battery, right? to gather our thoughts, to decompress. We feel guilty about that. Because it's perhaps, again, like myself, like I wasn't raised in an environment to where I was given permission to sit down on the couch, sit down on the chair and relax, read a book, catch up on some shows, binge watch some shows, have some me time. What is that? Because like the way that I was raised was, you don't have idle hands, right? Can you relate? Can I get an amen? I mean, that's how I was raised, was like busy work, right? Like if you were sitting down, you could be doing something, and we don't rest until you're in bed at night and you're sleeping. That was what I was brought up on for the longest time. And a lot of that, like, I've had to uncomfortably undo. And it has not been easy. But my thing is that even though for the longest time that I said that the stillness wasn't for me, but what if the stillness is the thing that heals us, that heals you, and healed me, is still healing me? Let me just speak this over you guys today. First off, let's take a deep breath. In and out. And I want to tell you that you are safe. You don't have to live on high alert anymore. You can unlearn what survival has taught you. And you can rewrite your emotional pattern that you've had throughout your life thus far. And you can rewrite it with faith. You can rewrite it with self-awareness, love, self-love, and a whole lot of grace. And if those are things that you are struggling to have for yourself, I'm here to tell you now that God has got those things for you. God is going to help you come to a self-awareness that you deserve love, that you deserve all of the grace, all of the peace that He has to offer you in this life. And we're going to do it with faith. Because if we don't, what else is there? This is the work of untangling. We are untangling the chaotic mess that we have otherwise been introduced to and have thrived in for far too long. It's up to us to unscramble our faith, right? Where do you think that the title comes from for this podcast? Unscrambling your faith and finding clarity in the chaos. I can only hope that after listening to this podcast, after listening to this and hanging out with me, that I guarantee you that whether it's tonight, tomorrow, within the next hour, I promise you, peace is coming into your life. Stillness is coming into your life. You deserve peace. You deserve love. You deserve all the grace. God is patient with us through every single layer that we work through in our life. Nobody's perfect. We always constantly want to be working on getting to like a better version of ourselves. Not perfection, but there's always room for improvement, right? And during that process, God is going to be patient with you every step of the way. So before we wrap this up, I want to leave you with a few questions to reflect on this week. A couple of things to ask yourself. When did I first learn that chaos meant connection? When did I first learn that chaos meant connection? What does calm feel like in my life now? Can you imagine that? And if you're not quite at a place like that in your life, ask yourself, what would calm look like in your life if you had it now? If you had it. What would it feel like to be calm within your body, within your physical state? And if you're at a point where you're not quite there yet, why does calm feel unfamiliar? Why does it feel unfamiliar to you? And more importantly, overall, how can I invite God into the parts of me that still think peace is dangerous. That is something that we shouldn't go near, that we shouldn't venture in. That's it for this week's podcast. I want to thank y'all so much for hanging out with me. You can do me a favor. If this is something that not only resonated with you, but someone maybe perhaps came to mind while you're listening to this podcast, it would do me a favor, big time, if you could share it with somebody who might need to hear it as well. And as always, you can help me out too by dropping a comment or a question below. I love hearing I want to hear where your hearts are at. I want to know what's speaking to you, what came to mind. Maybe there was a specific phrase or a word that spoke heavy on your heart, something that just kind of resonated, clicked with you. But until next time, you already know it. Don't forget to unscramble your faith and find clarity in the chaos. Thanks, y'all.